This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'm going to review the latest Twitter file revelations exposing U.S. propaganda and disinformation abroad. Does Kari Lake have a chance with her lawsuit? I'll discuss that. Who, if not Elon Musk, should run Twitter? And theologian Michael Foley joins me. We're going to talk about the origins of Christmas traditions, including why people kiss under the mistletoe. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
After a terrible and botched and messed up election in Arizona in November, there were a spate of lawsuits filed by the Republican candidates. Not Blake Masters, who conceded to Mark Kelly, but was it Mark Kelly, honey? Yes, Mark Kelly. But Kari Lake filed a lawsuit, Abe Hamadeh filed a lawsuit, and Mark Fincham filed a lawsuit. And these were for the gubernatorial spot, Secretary of State, and Attorney General. Now, the Fincham lawsuit was dismissed. So this is what sometimes happens. You go to a judge, you make a case, but the judge doesn't want to hear it. It could be the case has no merit. It could be also the judge is reluctant to intrude on what the judge sees as territory that's sort of outside the bounds of the judiciary. This is the electoral process. It's for the legislature and the executive branches to work out. We want no part of it. We're washing our hands off the matter. But the Abe Hamadeh lawsuit, I'm happy to report, is moving full speed ahead. And in fact, may well be the most promising of the three lawsuits. It's also the case that Abe Hamadeh's margin in that race is a few hundred votes. It's a very small margin. And so a very tiny amount of either fraudulent votes or invalid votes, votes that shouldn't have been cast, could be enough to change the outcome of that election. Now, in the Kari Lake lawsuit, which I've talked about before, there's a lot of meat in that lawsuit. There were 270, as I understand, affidavits. There were a lot of eyewitnesses and a lot of demonstrations of the ways in which essentially the Republican vote was suppressed. The problem is you can have things in the world that are unfair and that are unjust and that are wrong, but are not necessarily illegal. This is a key distinction. So let's say, for example, let's hypothetically say that there was a massive goof up on the part of the Maricopa County election officials, the tabulator machines mysteriously having worked beautifully during early voting, having worked perfectly during testing. Somehow, suddenly, there's some kind of a power outage and everything shuts down. And so as a result, there are all kinds of inconveniences. People have to wait. They have to go elsewhere to vote. But Maricopa basically pleads, hey, these things can happen. This is a disaster. But on the other hand, we didn't deliberately do this. And it has the disproportionate effect of suppressing the Republican vote. Why? Because Republicans choose to vote on election day and not in early voting. Well, a judge could say, well, that's all very unfortunate, but it's not illegal because it's not against the law for a machine to break down. It's not against the law for the power to go out. It's not against the law for glitches to occur. And as long as people do have a chance to cast their vote and nobody is denied their right to vote, I'm not going to get involved. And so I mention all this because this is sort of what seems to be going on in the Kari Lake lawsuit. Now, the good news is that the judge didn't dismiss the lawsuit as he did the Fincham lawsuit and say basically, sorry, Kari Lake, better luck next time. That was a real possibility. However, out of the 10 or so claims that Kari Lake made in her lawsuit, basically the judge has allowed two claims to go forward. So there were some claims that were made that the judge basically just decided to dismiss, to ignore. So, for example, Kari Lake said that there is a due process violation. Why? Because we're entitled to a process in which we can cast our votes, and that due process of law was violated. And the judge goes, no, that's too vague. I'm not going to go there. And then Kari Lake said, there's an equal protection violation. Now, this is a sophisticated argument, and I think it has some merit, where Kari Lake is saying, listen, if you look at Republicans and Democrats and you look at they should have an equal chance to cast their votes, not just as individuals, but also as groups. If you have these two teams that are, let's say, playing in a match, and you have rules that disable or disadvantage one team, you're having an unequal application of law. And so there is a equal protection violation here. But again, I think the judge found that's a little too risky. He didn't go down that road. So what he's basically said is, look, I'm going to let Kari Lake look at these ballots, and it is only a sample of ballots. He's not letting Kari Lake's team look at all the ballots. And he says, basically, I'm going to look for intentional violations of law. In other words, I'm looking for intentional manipulation of the tabulator configurations. I'm looking for intentional violations of ballot custody. My point is that these things, I hope that Kari Lake can prove them, but they're very hard to prove. You can prove that something was malfunctioning. How do you prove that they meant for that to occur? Well, I guess you can bring in circumstantial evidence. They were working fine. Mysteriously, they stopped working on the day of the election. So this is where Kari Lake is going to press forward. Now, she seems pretty optimistic. She was at the Turning Point USA conference. We won, where our case is going to be heard. I got to confess that on the balance, as I read what the judge said and decided, I am not optimistic that she will be able to overturn this election result. Again, people go, well, don't you support Kari Lake? Of course I do. But I'm distinguishing between what I want to happen and what I think is likely or going to happen. In life, we should always make a distinction. The party that you want to win isn't necessarily the party that's going to win or that's likely to win. So an advocacy of one side is not the same as a prediction of what's going to happen. So I don't know. This is a legal case going forward. I wish Kari Lake the best, but I do so with some anxiety or trepidation that this does not look to me like it's going to end well, unfortunately.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm excited to bring you my biggest bedding sale ever, just in time for Christmas. Get my Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98. A set of pillowcases, only $9.98. Rejuvenate your bed with a MyPillow mattress topper for as low as $99.99. We also have blankets in a variety of sizes, colors, and styles. We even have blankets for your pets. Get duvets, quilts, down comforters, body pillows, bolster pillows, and so much more, all at the biggest discounts ever. I know my bedding products are perfect for you, and I'm extending my money-back guarantee for Christmas until March 1st, 2023, making them the perfect gifts for your friends, your family, and everyone you know. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code, and you'll get huge discounts on all MyPillow bedding products, including my Giza Dream bed sheets, for as low as $29.98. Get all your shopping done now while quantities last.
A couple of weeks ago, Elon Musk had a very enigmatic and interesting tweet. He said, Twitter is both a social media company and a crime scene. And at the time, I thought he was referring specifically to the Twitter suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop and all the corruption and criminality contained therein. But it turns out he was talking about a lot more. He was talking about massive abuses going on between the government and Twitter, various agencies of the government. And we're still waiting, by the way, for the sort of Twitter COVID file. That's been promised. It looks like Elon Musk, maybe partly as a result of that, has become vehemently anti-Fauci. I can't wait to see that one. But the latest drop, which again, comes from a new guy. This is a fellow named Li Fang, who writes for the Intercept. And I should note before I dive into this that the mainstream media continues to ignore this. I mean, this is outrageous, but they're acting as if it's still 1974. In other words, the mainstream media is acting like if they don't cover it, it ceases to exist. Of course, this is no longer true for the simple reason that Twitter is much bigger than the New York Times, is much bigger than the Washington Post. Quite frankly, when you look at the traction, I'm bigger than the New York Times. And what I mean by that is not that is that if you look at my Twitter following, the New York Times has a lot more followers. But look at the traction on the typical tweet that they do, and then look at the traction on one of my tweets and see which one is getting more retweets, more likes, more action, so to speak. So I think what's happening is the mainstream media has this delusion that they are the ones who completely set the agenda. They still have power, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the kind of monopolistic power that they once had, and this is a very good thing. Now, the latest Twitter files drop actually has to do not with the FBI. It has to do with the military, the CIA, if you will, the U.S. Central Command, that is sometimes called CENTCOM. And as it turns out, the U.S. Central Command, the U.S. military, and the U.S. intelligence agencies have been using Twitter as a vehicle for, you guessed it, disinformation abroad. They're putting out basically lies. And they're not only putting out lies in the sense that their content is lies, but it's a double lie because they're creating fake accounts with fake people who are pretending to be Middle Eastern or pretending to be African or pretending to be Asian. And so people who see this on Twitter go, oh, wow, this is an Afghan woman and she's really upset about the Taliban. Oh, this is somebody in Iraq protesting against the Iraqi regime. No, it's not. It's not someone in Iraq. It's basically someone at Langley, or it's someone at the in the U.S. military. Now, look, I mean, it is not a secret that the U.S. military engages in sort of psyops, psychological operations. But let's remember that yesterday, of course, I had a guy on talking about American exceptionalism. And part of American exceptionalism is that other people do these official lies. They do this official propaganda. They have Pravda and Izvestia under the Soviet Union. The Chinese don't hesitate to lie. But we're different. Why? We don't do those things. And you think we don't need to do those things. If we're a free society and they're not, if the Taliban is doing these horrible things and the Syrians are doing these horrible things, well, just describe what they're doing. What is the necessity of pretending to be someone else? What is the necessity of saying things like, well, Iran is getting ready to do this or Iraq is getting ready to do that, and you know it's false, and yet you're putting it out. And here's the remarkable thing. A private company, Twitter, is partnered with you. They know that you're lying, and they're willing to let you lie on their platform. Wow. I mean, all of this reminds me, really, I'm going to read you now a line from the end of Orwell's Animal Farm. Remember, in Animal Farm, the pigs claim to be the noble ones who are going to be saving us from the human beings, right, from the man. And Orwell closes the book by saying, the creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. The point being that the good guys and the bad guys who were previously distinguished were free society, they're a totalitarian society. Suddenly it's not so easy to tell. And Li Fang here in the Twitter files has chapter and verse on this. The United States is evidently spreading disinformation and lies in places like Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Kuwait, and beyond. Now, again, this may not be something that the ordinary guy is like, so what? Well, the so what of this is that when stuff like this comes out, and by the way, 30 years ago, it would be the left-wing media's job and thrill to expose this kind of thing. So isn't it interesting how the tables have turned and the left-wing media is now in league with the deep state, in league with the military, perfectly willing to protect these lies, not willing to report on them. So when I come back after the break, I'm going to look in a little more detail at what's in the Twitter files, and also a strange question raised by Elon Musk, which is who should be the next CEO of Twitter? In the wake of our unforgettable trip to Israel, I want to introduce you today to our friends at the Jerusalem Institute of Justice, or JIJ. Since 2004, they've been defending the rights of Christians in Israel and in the Middle East, promoting legislation and providing funding for the rehabilitation of victims of human trafficking and prostitution. And through the United Nations, they've been advocates for Israel and human rights in the Middle East. In Prophet Micah 6:8, it says, "Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. This is their heart's desire." Let's support and invest in JIJ's vision for the Holy Land of God's chosen people. You can commit to blessing Jerusalem, the city that loves God so dearly, by partnering with those I trust at the Jerusalem Institute of Justice. Let's make it our biblical responsibility as Christians to support Israel now, today, and forever. Let's do our part to support this great cause. Visit jij.org/Dinesh. That's jij.org/Dinesh. The Twitter files on U.S. military disinformation begins with a guy named Nathaniel Kaler, working with U.S. Central Command, which is called CENTCOM. And he tells Twitter, please whitelist all these Arab language accounts that, quote, "we use to amplify certain messages." This is code for lies. We're putting out lies. We want you to help us put out lies. And in the spreadsheet, he sends 52 accounts. And he asks for priority service for 6 of them. One of them, for example, was called @Yemen Current. Again, pretends to be kind of a website inside of Yemen, giving people information. But essentially what the military is trying to do here is control the public opinion in Yemen about the impact of U.S. drone strikes in Yemen. They're putting out information through this account, pretending again to be a Yemeni source. That, these drone strikes are actually only killing the bad guys. No civilians really died. Now, again, I don't know whether any civilians died in the strike or not, but my point is the U.S. military here does not hesitate to be masquerading as Yemenis and putting out the same kind of false information that, for example, Russia is now putting out about the Ukraine. And it goes on like this. By and large, we find that this is not just going on in Yemen, it's going on all over the place. Now, interestingly, the Twitter files corroborate something that was discovered by researchers at something called the Stanford Internet Observatory. They had noticed several months ago in a report that a whole bunch of accounts on Twitter appeared to be part of a sort of state-run, meaning U.S. state-run intelligence operation. The people in those accounts weren't real. In fact, their faces had been generated through, it's called photorealism. In other words, a practice called deepfakes. So it looks like a real person, but artificial intelligence has created this non-existing individual. And these memes and faces and websites were created, by the way, not just on Twitter. The Stanford Observatory noticed they were on Telegram, they were on Facebook. And in most cases, there was no disclosure that these were accounts being run by the U.S. military. And this is the point, that in all these Arabic language accounts and Yemeni accounts and so on, the description is serving Iraqis and Arabs. So again, people are given the impression that this is a local account run by a local guy. So this is disinformation. And remember, I think I said this yesterday, there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is when somebody believes something that is mistaken. And so you're misinformed. But there's a certain innocence that goes along with misinformation. Disinformation is a whole different matter. Typically, disinformation is a systematic, knowing promulgation of lies and knowing suppression of the truth. And apparently, Twitter has been an accessory to disinformation. I mean, it's kind of ironic because all these social media platforms say, well, we're actively suppressing misinformation and disinformation. And what's becoming really clear, no, not only are they not actively suppressing misinformation, they're often suppressing information. And moreover, they are promulgating disinformation. And again, Twitter has been honest enough to put it on the table. Here's Elon Musk. Here's my crime scene. You check it out. You look at it. Here are the emails. Here are the texts, redacted with the names in some cases, but nevertheless, right there for the public to see. This is what makes the news media's refusal to cover all this also interesting because, again, this is this is material of undisputed authenticity. And we know it's going on at YouTube. We know it's going on at Google, going on at Meta. We just haven't seen the crime scene. Because those people are still covering it up. Of course, the game is up. We kind of know that that's what they're doing too, but they haven't fessed up. I guess that's the point. Now, Elon Musk is doing such an important job at Twitter that I'm a little pained to say that he ran, in my opinion, a very foolish poll. Should I stay on as the CEO? He was voted down in that poll, 57, I think, to 43. And he's decided, well, I guess the people have spoken, and I need to step down. Now, I think that this poll is distorted by a number of things. In fact, the Babylon Bee was joking that, yeah, Elon Musk was losing until the mail-in vote came in, and then he won decisively, and Joe Biden style retained his position. But the reality is that a lot of conservatives fled Twitter after the great banning and great suppression, the great deplatforming of 2020 and 2021. And so you guys still have a lot of leftists on Twitter, and of course a lot of leftists working at Twitter. And so the point is, who knows if this is an actual vote, but evidently it could be. Debbie says, well, maybe Elon Musk never intended to really run Twitter, and that's possible. I mean, the most important point, of course, is that he has someone who is as committed to free speech as he is. Apparently a leading candidate is a friend of mine, David Sachs, who went to Stanford, wrote a book about denouncing political correctness at Stanford many years ago. Great guy, now a kind of part of the tech and venture capitalist industry. I noticed Blake Masters did a very interesting thread on his Twitter feed about what he would do to fix Twitter. And I was reading that and thinking, well, are you sort of auditioning for the job here? He laid out ways in which he would improve the financial picture of Twitter. So Blake Masters could be trying to put himself in contention. Well, either way, the point I want to make is that we need Twitter as a free speech, on the free speech front line. And I hope that Elon Musk can ensure that it stays that way. Look, you and your business did the tough thing during COVID. You paid your people, you pulled your business through the pandemic, and now doing the tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org. Government funds are available to reward companies with 2 or more employees that stayed open during COVID. This is not a loan. You don't have to pay it back. Basically, the government is refunding money that you paid out, so they're giving back your money. Nobody knows more about this program than the CPAs and tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing up front. They do all the work and only keep a percentage of the cash that they get you. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify, including those who took PPP loans, even if you had increases in sales. You did the tough thing for your employees during COVID. Let covidtaxrelief.org help you get up to $26,000 per employee. Visit covidtaxrelief.org. That's covidtaxrelief.org. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast a new guest, Dr. Michael Foley. We're going to be talking about a very interesting and very appropriate for this time of the year book. It's called Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe. It's about Christmas traditions. Now, Dr. Foley is a professor of patristics in the Great Texts program at Baylor University. He's a professor of theology at the Aquinas Institute. He's the author of over 400 articles and 14 books. And, well, Debbie wanted me to read this part. Mike and his wife, Alexandra, live in their adopted hometown of Waco, Texas, where they enjoy spending Christmas holidays with their 6 children, 12 chickens, 2 turtles, 1 dog, and 12,000 bees. Mike, welcome very much. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. This is such an offbeat and at the same time interesting book that takes things that people know about and deal with every Christmas season, but they don't know the roots, the origins, and I've wondered about some of these things for many years. So let me begin with good old Santa Claus. I mean, we have Christmas, the birth of Christ in a manger with Mary and Joseph and the wise men, and all of that is in the Bible. Where do we get Santa Claus?
Well, it starts with St. Nicholas, who was indeed a real person. He was a very holy bishop from the 4th century in what is now Turkey. He was always known as the people's champion. He had the back of the little guy. He protected people from unjust imperial taxes, from poverty, from being falsely accused of murder. There are all these stories about him protecting the little guy. And then after his death, legends about him only grew and grew and grew. He became a very popular gift giver during the Middle Ages. He would visit children on the vigil of his feast, December 5th, and give them gifts. But he didn't turn into Santa Claus until the early 19th century, thanks to a handful of American authors in New York City.
What? So you're telling me that Santa Claus, because I assume that the Santa Claus tradition came out of Europe, was imported automatically to America, but you're saying that it's kind of an American tradition. Say more about that.
It's very American and very New York. So these Americans had heard the stories of St. Nicholas thanks to the Dutch influence when New York City was New Amsterdam. So they knew about St. Nicholas, Sinterklaas. And what they basically did was they took elements from Norse mythology about Thor and Woden, and they combined it with the St. Nicholas story. So, for example, Thor, after whom our Thursday is named, is the god of fire, which is why he's associated with chimneys, and his color is red. He drives a chariot in the sky pulled by two goats. And when the goats step on clouds, it makes thunder. And so they basically took these elements, and then they took the old stories about St. Nicholas, they put them in a blender, and they turned on the switch.
And somehow that New York tradition then became universalized, because, I mean, that was my impression of Santa Claus growing up in India, in Mumbai. So you're saying that it came out of St. Nick, it was then transformed in New York and then exported around the world. That's quite fascinating. All right, let's talk about Christmas carols. You lay out in the book the very interesting sort of history of Christmas carols. Tell us a little bit about the origins of all these Christmas carols that we know and love.
Oh my gosh, there are so many different stories. I think one of the big surprises is how a lot of these were born in very surprising ways. You would think that, Christmas carols, they're written during the winter when you're meditating on the Christmas story. The most popular recorded Christmas song of all time was actually conceived during a heat wave in California in 1945. Mel Torme was visiting his writing partner, and it was July 45. They're having this terrible heat wave. He goes into his friend's house, can't find him anywhere, but he sees on the piano a notepad with 4 lines: chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Jack Frost nipping at your nose, etc. And he asks his buddy, what's this all about? And the buddy says, Mel, I've tried everything. I had a cold drink. I took a dip in the pool. I just cannot cool down. I figured if I could mentally get myself in a winter space, I could cool down. And Mel Torme said, well, you've got a great song here. And within 45 minutes, they finished all the lyrics and added the melody. That very afternoon, they went to their good friend, Nat King Cole. They played the song for him, and he said, that's my song. And that is how the most popular Christmas song ever recorded was produced. It would never have happened if private homes had air conditioning in 1945.
Unbelievable. Let's take a quick pause. When we come back, more with Dr. Michael Foley on why we kiss under the mistletoe and other Christmas traditions. What some of us would do just to be young again, the simple things like climbing stairs, getting in and out of bed, taking a walk aren't always that simple. Too many aches and pains, but they can be, because thankfully now there's a 100% drug-free solution. It's called Relief Factor. Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can finally do the exercises she likes, planks, push-ups, a stationary bike, all thanks to Relief Factor. It's been a real game changer for her and for so many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of only $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 833-690-7246 to find out more. That number, 833-690-7246, or go to relieffactor.com. You'll feel the difference. I'm back with Dr. Michael Foley. We're talking about his book, fascinating book, Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe. It's really about the origins and stories around Christmas traditions. We were talking, Mike, about Christmas carols, and you have an interesting sort of account of how these carols they caught on in Christian Europe. The Lutherans in Germany were kind of okay with all this, but then there were Protestant, little more radical movements in Protestantism that were sort of against this idea of carols. Talk a little bit about that, and then how carols made a kind of comeback.
No, absolutely. And it wasn't just carols, it was all of Christmas. So there were several, Protestant groups that were very fine with Christmas, and the Lutherans were among them. They have produced a lot of wonderful Christmas customs or Advent customs, like the Advent wreath, the Advent calendar. But the Puritans in England despised Christmas with every fiber of their being. Talk about Grinches. So when they took power under Oliver Cromwell, they made Christmas illegal, and you could be thrown into jail for celebrating Christmas. So they literally had police marauding the streets, sniffing the air. And if they smelled a Christmas goose or mincemeat pie, they would barge into the home and arrest the family.
Now, was this also true, by the way? We hear, of course, about the Puritans who came on the Mayflower. Was that hostility to Christmas also part of the Puritan tradition in early America?
Very much so. And it carried over even into the 19th century among the Boston Brahmins. Boston was like one of the last cities to recognize Christmas as a legal holiday. And you had to go, if you were at public school, you had to go to class on December 25th. And factory workers, the factories would not only stay open on December 25th, but they started the shift extra early at 5 a.m. so that the Irish workers could not attend Christmas Mass in the morning.
Remarkable. Hey, why do people kiss under the mistletoe? Debbie was like, we should bring some mistletoe and do a demonstration. So we apologize that we aren't carrying that off here. But what's the root of that tradition?
The short answer is the Druids. They thought of mistletoe as a magic plant. It was green in the dead of winter. It had berries in the dead of winter, which is rather rare. It grew but never touched the soil. So they had a custom of making peace under the mistletoe. And when Christians came to those lands, they added their own signature greeting of peace, which is the kiss.
Fascinating. We're in an era in which we have Christmas and everybody gets into the idea of Christmas. But of course, Christmas appears to have become, I would say, overwhelmingly secularized. Certainly, if you listen now to the kind of ads that you see around Christmas, there'll be, you rarely have ads that refer to Christ or refer to holiness or refer even to the manger. They tend to be very happy holidays-ish, if you know what I mean. So my question to you is, are you worried about, certainly the roots of these traditions look to be a hybrid of the holy and the profane, of the sacred and the secular. Are you worried today that we're losing the spirit of Christmas? And what is one way we can get it back?
Well, you're absolutely right. I am worried, but I worry about all aspects of the plight of Christianity in our post-Christian world. But I do think there is a way, besides an internal spiritual renewal, that we can get Christmas back on the right track. And that is to sort of adopt the older model of not celebrating Christmas before Christmas. We now start the Christmas marketing season earlier and earlier each year. This year, I saw jack-o'-lanterns and Christmas trees side by side being sold in the store. We don't even wait for the day after Thanksgiving anymore. And the result of that is by the time Christmas comes, we're sick of it. We're sick of the saccharine songs and everything else. The older model is observe December as Advent. That is to say, as a time of joyful restraint. You're still joyful, but you're pulling your punches. Then Christmas comes, you pull out all the stops and you celebrate the 12 days of Christmas, which was this period of unbroken merriment between December 25th and the Feast of the Epiphany on January 6th. That to me is a much healthier model of joy and merriment and religious piety.
What a fantastic idea, and what an interesting book. It's Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe. Thanks, Dr. Michael Foley, for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You've heard me talk about the amazing benefits of taking balance of nature every day. There are so many satisfied customers, Debbie and I included, who tell stories of how balance of nature has been one of the healthiest decisions we've made this year. Well, Balance of Nature has decided to do something special for those of you who are ready to get this maximum nutrition that people are talking about. Their founder, Doc Howard, often talks about the benefits of combining their star product, fruits and veggies in a capsule, just like this, with their fiber and spice supplement. That's this one. So he's giving you a way to get both at a special holiday price. Wow. Right now, as a special holiday offer, get $25 off plus free fiber and spice with your first preferred order of fruits and veggies when you use discount code America. This offer can end at any time. Don't delay. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. Use discount code America. I've been talking about the great impact of Christianity in shaping Western culture, and I'm continuing my exploration of the Christian ideal that I've called the affirmation of ordinary life and its consequences. Well, one consequence is simply the elevation of compassion to becoming a core virtue of our society. Now, I'm not saying that Christianity invented compassion. Obviously, human beings have the capacity to be compassionate. But compassion, at least not compassion, compassion understood as a universal ideal. This is something that Christianity has focused on, and other cultures really don't. Think of it sort of this way. Let's imagine that there was, right today, a huge famine in Sri Lanka or in Burundi or in Haiti. What would happen? Well, first of all, you'll notice that there is a tremendous response from Western countries. You have a deployment of all kinds of aid. You would have churches getting involved. You would have Doctors Without Borders on the scene. You would have the Red Cross, food banks, all of this going on. Now, the West isn't the only rich part of the world. There's a lot of wealth in China. There's a lot of wealth in the Middle East, parts of Asia. But you'll notice that those countries do, well, basically nothing. They look over and go, oh, that's very tragic, and they kind of move on with life. Now, why is this? Is it because these other countries are just cruel and don't care about people? No, they do care about people. They care about their own people. And this is the point. I remember when I was growing up in India, we learned a slogan, the tears of strangers are only water. And this is a kind of maybe rough way of putting it, but the basic idea is, look, you owe obligations to your family, to your relatives, maybe next in line, your neighbors, next in line, your own tribe or your own community. But if somebody from a different tribe, a different country shows up, they have a problem, well, you wish them well, but it's not your problem. Christianity begins to change this and introduce the notion of, well, universal brotherhood. And not only is there this idea of universal brotherhood, but we should feel compassion for our fellow man, regardless of whether or not they're in our family or our community or our tribe, maybe not even our country. Now, if we go to ancient Greece and Rome before Christianity, there was a certain ideal of doing good, which I would describe not as compassion, but as magnanimity. So what is magnanimity? Well, Aristotle speaks about what he calls the great-souled man. And the great-souled man actually helps people. And he also does all kinds of things, what we would today call social service for the community, for the polis. But why does he do it? He does it because he's great. He does it to express his greatness or his superiority. Aristocrats in ancient Greece and Rome would fund baths and statues and parks that bore their names. Caesar famously in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar goes, I'm going to give all the land this side of the Tiber to the Roman citizens. But this is magnanimity. This is not the same thing as compassion. Compassion is fellow feeling. It means really, well, the actual word means suffering along with other people. And so we help people in Haiti and Rwanda, not because we're better than them, but because we're like them, because we are all in the same human predicament. We're all, as we say, in the same boat. So Christian humility is the very opposite of classical magnanimity. The Christians built the first hospitals. They, originally were just for Christians, but pretty soon they were open to everyone. In fact, in the Middle Ages, Christians would even admit Muslims to Christian hospitals. And these are Muslims who were fighting against Christians in the Crusades. Today, many hospitals have Christian names. Think of like St. John's Hospital, St. Luke's, Methodist Hospital, St. Jude, Lutheran Hospital, and so on. And think of relief organizations like the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, even if the organizations have become largely secularized. And some of them have not become entirely secularized. I mean, the Salvation Army still bears a Christian imprint. And nevertheless, these organizations, even if secular, are the product of Christian influence, and they reflect the spread of Christian influence in society. This is, by the way, also true of the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, organizations devoted to service. But the ideal of service is a Christian ideal. Think of great Christian figures, Vincent de Paul, Mother Teresa, people who have devoted their lives to the poor and to the sick. And then you ask yourself, where else do you find this? Let's look in other cultures, let's look in other religions, let's look to secular society to see if you can find a similar tradition of disinterested, compassionate universalism. And I don't think you'll find it. Even when you find it in secular precincts, it is directly traceable, as in the case of hospitals, to the influence of Christianity. So you don't have to be a Christian believer or even a Christian to acknowledge that this Western faith has done a great deal to improve human life and relieve human suffering. Drawing on my book, What's So Great About Christianity, I now want to talk about a new idea that Christianity implanted into the world that has totally changed the world. And this idea is so powerful and so enduring that even people who are very distant from Christianity, or even people who emphatically reject Christianity, think, for example, about someone who wants nothing to do with Christianity, been there, done that, or someone who's a militant atheist, even these people, I will argue, embrace this Christian ideal, can't do without it. In fact, it's kind of at the center of the way that they think and they talk and what they profess to cherish. This is quite simply the idea of human dignity, of human equality that comes out of the idea of human dignity. So the equality of human beings, the moral equality of human beings, is the fundamental idea that I want to talk about. And it's, of course, an idea I think that Christians and non-Christians alike cherish. Now, we don't always follow that idea in practice, but I'm talking about the fact that we believe in it and we give lip service to it and we uphold it, and it is one of the central ideals of our society. By the way, the idea of equality was, of course, the propelling force behind the campaign to end slavery, the movement to introduce representative democracy and popular self-government, and also, by the way, the effort to articulate a successful doctrine of international human rights that are not limited to one group or one tribe or one people, but apply to everybody. Now, when I say that I'm going to celebrate this ideal of equality, which I am, it comes with a kind of a warning. And the warning is that if we, as a society and as a civilization, move away from Christianity, we're going to be moving away from this ideal also. In other words, we're going to see an erosion, a diminution of this ideal. And so am I suggesting that over time, equal rights, equal dignity, the idea of universal rights will begin to wither? Yes, that is exactly what I am saying. All right. Now, when Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, he said, all men are created equal. And he claimed that this was a self-evident truth. Now, self-evident, really? How is it self-evident that all men are created equal? I think if you stood on the streets in most places around the world, let's just say in Addis Ababa or in Rio de Janeiro or in Islamabad in Pakistan and say, all men are created equal, most people would be like, are you insane? People are very different, better or worse. Some are stronger than others. Others are taller than others. Some are better looking than others. Some are sweeter natured than others. People are different in intelligence, in moral character. So the idea that there's, not only is there equality, but this equality is like obvious is a little strange. Now, Jefferson knew this. He was asserting equality of a special kind. Human beings, he was saying, are moral equals. They don't behave equally well, but each of their lives has a moral worth that is no greater and no less than anyone else. So this is a strange doctrine, right? It's the idea that a janitor, a street sweeper, a loader on a dock in Philadelphia has the same moral worth as Franklin, as Jefferson himself. Each life is valuable. No one's life is more valuable than someone else's. Now, this idea of the equal worth and indeed the preciousness of human life, this is the Christian idea. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from the idea that God loves us equally. God created us. He places infinite value on each human life. He loves everybody the same. So in Christianity, you're not saved through your family, your tribe, your city. Notice that salvation is an individual matter. God has a sort of vocation, a plan for your life, and that's an individual plan. It applies to you and to you alone. And this was an idea that really began in early Christianity, continued through the Middle Ages, highly stressed in the Reformation by Martin Luther, because Martin Luther stresses the individualism of the Christian journey, which is not only will we be judged when we die as individuals, but also we live our lives as individuals. We relate to God during our lives individually. Now, we might worship in a church or communally, but our relationship to God is an individual one. So what we're getting at here is that some very powerful ideas in our culture, individualism, equal dignity, equal rights, we see here the Christian roots of those ideas. Now, we're sometimes told that that's not the case. Modern democracy and equal rights goes back to ancient Greece, but this is not the case. Yes, of course, in ancient Greece you had democracy, but as I'll pick up tomorrow and demonstrate, democracy in ancient Greece, first of all, coexisted with mass-scale slavery, and second of all, was a democracy of a very different kind than the democracy we have today. The democracy we have today doesn't come in any direct way from ancient Athens. It comes more from the influence of Christianity.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.